Chapter 32 of The Air Trust by George Allan, England. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 32. Ominous Developments. The first intimation that Flint and Waldron had of any opposition to their plans, of any revolt, of any danger, was at 3:15 on the afternoon of October 8th, 1925. All that afternoon, busy with their final plans for the immediate extension of their system, they had been going over certain data with Herzog, receiving reports from branch managers and conferring with the Congressional Committee that, together with Dillon Slade, their Secret Service tool, now also President Supple's private secretary, they had peremptorily summoned from Washington to receive instructions. In the more than 4 years that had passed since they had put Gabriel behind bars, years fruitful in strikes and lockouts, in prostitutions of justice, in sluggings and crude massacres, both men had altered notably. Though the national censorship now no longer permitted any cartooning of a seditious nature, i.e. representing any of the Air Trust's notables, old Flint's features tempted the artist's pencil more than ever. Save for a little white fringe of hair on the back of his head, he had become almost bald, thus adding greatly to his strong suggestion of a vulture. His face was now more yellow and shrunken than ever. Due to a rather heavier consumption of his favorite drug, morphine, his nose had hooked more strongly, and his one gold tooth of other days now had 2 more to bear it company. His eyes, too, behind his thick pince-nez, had grown more shifty, cold, and cruelly calculating. If it be possible to conceive a fox, a buzzard, and a jackal merged in one, old Isaac Flint today represented that unnatural and hideous hybrid. Now, as he stood facing Tiger Waldron in the inner and sacrosanct office of the Air Trust plant at Niagara, the office that even the President of these United States approached with deference and due humility, the snarl on his face revealed the beast soul of the man. "Damnation," he was saying as he shook a newly received aerogram at his partner. "What's this, I'd like to know? What does this mean? All telegraphic communication west of Chicago has suddenly stopped. And from half a dozen points in the southern states, news is coming in that railway service is being interrupted. See here, Waldron, this won't do. Your part of the business has always been to carry on the publicity end, the newspaper end, the molding of public opinion and political thought, and the maintenance of free, clear rail and aero communication everywhere all over the world. But now, all at once, see here?" Waldron raised red, bleared eyes at his irate partner. He, too, was more the beast than 4 years ago. No less the tiger now, but more the pig. High evil living had done its work on him. An unhealthy purple suffused his heavily jowled face. Beneath his eyes, sodden bags of flesh hung pendant. His lips, loose and lascivious, now sucked indolently at the costly cigar he was smoking as he sat leaning far back in his desk chair. And so those two, angry accuser and indifferent accused, faced each other for a moment, while incessant, dull, mighty, the thunders of the giant cataract mingled with the trembling diapason of the stupendous turbines in the rock-hewn caverns where old Niagara now toiled in fetters, to swell their power and fling gold into their bottomless coffers. "See here," Flint repeated angrily, once more shaking the dispatches at his mate. "Even our wireless system, all over the West and Southwest, has quit working. And you sit there staring at me like... "That'll do, Flint," the younger man retorted in a rough, hoarse voice. "If there's any trouble, I'll find it and repair it. Very well. But I'll not be talked to in any such way. Damn it, you can't speak to me, Flint, as if I were one of the people. If you own half the earth, I'll have you understand I own the other half. So go easy, Flint. Go damned easy." Malevolently, he eyed the old man's beast-like face. The scorn and dislike he had conceived for Flint years ago, when Flint had failed to win back Catherine to him, had long grown keener and more bitter. Waldron took it as a personal affront that Flint, apparently so worn and feeble, could still hang on to life and brains enough to dominate the enterprise. 1,000 times, if once he had wished Flint well dead and buried and out of the way, so that he, Waldron, could grasp the whole circle of the stupendous air trust. This, his supreme ambition, had been constantly curbed by Flint's survival, and as the months and years had passed, his hate had grown more deep, more ugly, more venomous. Why curse it? Waldron often thought. The old dope has taken enough morphine in his lifetime to have killed 100 ordinary men, and yet he still clings on and withers and grows yellow like an old dead leaf that will not drop from the tree. When will he drop? When will Father Time pick the despicable antique? My God, is the man immortal? Such being the usual tenor of his thoughts concerning Flint, small wonder that he took the old man's chiding with an ill grace, and warned him pointedly not to continue it. Now facing the billionaire, he fairly stared him out of countenance. An awkward silence followed. Both heard, with relief, a rapping at the office door. "Come," snapped Flint. A clerk appeared with a yellow envelope in hand. "Another wireless, sir," said he. Flint snatched it from him. "Send Herzog and Slate at once," he commanded as he ripped the envelope. "Well, more trouble?" insolently drawled Tiger, happy in the paling of the old man's face and the sudden look of apprehension there. For all answer, Flint handed him the message. Waldron read, "Southern and Gulf states, all seemingly cut off from every kind of communication this p.m. Can get no news. Is this according to your orders? If not, can you inform me probable cause? I ask instructions. K." Silence, a minute. Then Waldron whistled and began pulling at his thick lower lip, a sure sign of perturbation. "By the Almighty, Flint," said he, maybe I was wrong just now to be so confoundedly touchy about what you said. This certainly looks odd, doesn't it? It can't be a series of coincidences. There must be something back of it all. But what? Rebellion is out of the question now, and has been for a long time. Revolution? The way we're organized, the very idea is an absurdity. But if not these, what? Flint stared at him with drug-contracted eyes. "Yes, that's the question," he rapped out. "What can it mean? Perhaps Slade can tell us," he added, as the Secret Service man quietly entered through a private door at the rear of the office. "Tell you what, gentlemen," asked Slade, smirking and rubbing his hands. "The meaning of that, and that, and that," snapped old Flint, thrusting the telegrams at the newcomer. Grunted the Secret Serviceman, as he glanced them over. "That's damned odd, but it's of no real moment. If there's really any trouble, any outbreak or whatnot, of course it can't amount to anything. All you have to do is order the president to call out the troops and—" "Yes, I can order him all right," snarled Flint. "But in case all our wires are down and all our wireless plants put out of commission, to say nothing of our transport service interrupted, what then? There's no doubt in my mind, Slade, that another upheaval is upon us. The fact that we stamped out the 1918 and 1922 uprisings, and that rivers ran red and city streets were flushed with blood, apparently hasn't made any impression on the cattle. Damn it all, I say, can't you keep things quiet? Can't you?" In a very frenzy, he paced the office, his face twitching, his bony fingers snapping with the extremity of his agitation. Suddenly, he faced Slade. "See here, you," he exclaimed. "This certainly means another uprising. It can't mean anything else, and you've allowed it, you hear? No, don't deny the fact," he cried, as the detective tried to oppose a word of self-defense. "It's your fault, at last analysis, and if anything happens, you and the president, Supple, have got to answer to me. Personally, do you hear? You've got to pay. Pay, and with devilish big interest, too," growled Tiger, fixing his bleared, savage eyes on Slade. "What did I make that man president for anyhow?" snarled Flint, "if not to do my bidding and keep things still? Why did I put you in as his private secretary, if not to have you watch him and see that he did do my bidding? Why did I have Congress pass all those bills and things, except to give you the weapons and tools to hold the lid on? You've had a huge army and a conscripted militia given you. and hundreds of wireless plants, and military roads, and war equipment beyond all calculating. You've had thousands of spies organized and put under your control. At your suggestion, I've had all political power taken away from the dogs, and everything done that you've asked for, and this is the kind of work you do." Livid with rage, the old billionaire stood there shaking by his desk, his face a fearful mask of passions and evil lusts for vengeance and power. Slade, recognizing his master, even as President Supple, on more than one occasion had been forced in terrible personal interviews to recognize him, said no word. But in the Secret Service men's eyes, a brutal gleam flashed its message of hate and loathing. Foul as Slade was, he balked at times, in the face of this man's cruel and naked savagery. "I tell you," continued Flint, now having recovered his breath, "I tell you, you're worse than useless, you and your president, ha! President puppet indeed. Take that great Smoky Mountain clue, for instance. On the rumor that the ringleaders of the swine were up there somewhere in the North Carolina mountains, you sent your two best men. And what's the latest news? What do you have to tell me? You know. Other airmen of yours have just reported that nothing can be found but ruins of the socialist refuge there. Nothing but those, and the half-melted vanadium steel identification tags of your best scouts. And their machine is gone, and with it, the birds we wanted. Then, close on the heels of this, all wires go flat, all wireless breaks down, all rails are interrupted, and hell's to pay." Fair in Slade's face, he shook his trembling first. "Urgh, you devilish impotent faker, you four-flusher, you toy detective, you and your president, too, aren't worth the liquid oxygen to blow you to Hades. See here, Slade, you get out on this job, now, and do it damned quick, you understand? Or there'll be some shakeup in your office and in the White House, too. When I buy and pay for tools, I insist that the tools work. If they don't..." He snatched up a pencil from the desk, broke it in half, and threw the pieces on the floor. "Like that," said he, and stamped on them. Waldron nodded approval. "Just like that," he echoed, "and then some. Go now," Flint commanded, pointing at the door. "Inside an hour. I want some reports, and I want them to be satisfactory. If you and Supple can't get things open again and start the troops and machine guns before then, look out. That's all I've got to say. Now, go." End of Chapter 32. Chapter 33 of The Air Trust by George Allan England. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 33. Now comes the hour supreme. Hardly had the Secret Service man taken his leave, slinking away like a whipped cur, yet with an ugly snarl that presaged evil, when Herzog appeared. "Come here," said Flint curtly, heated with his burst of passion. "Yes, sir," the scientist replied, approaching. "What is it, sir?" Still shifty and cringing was he, in presence of the masters, though with the men beneath him at the vast plant, and now his importance had grown till he controlled more than 8,000. Rumor declared him an intolerable tyrant. "Tell me, Herzog, what's the condition of the plant at this present moment?" "Just how do you mean, sir?" "Suppose there were to be trouble of any kind. How are we fixed for it? How's the oxygen supply and everything? Good God, man, unlimber. You're paid to know things, and tell 'em. Now talk." Thus adjured, Herzog washed his hands with imaginary soap, and in a depreciating voice began. "Trouble, sir? What trouble could there be? There's not the faintest sign of any organization among the men. They're submissive as so many rabbits, sir, and—" "Damn you, shut up," roared Flint. "I didn't summon you to come up here and give me a lecture on labor conditions at the works. The trouble I refer to is possible outside interference. Maybe some kind of wild-eyed socialist upheaval or attack or whatnot. In case it comes, what's our condition? Tell me in a few words, and for God's sake, keep to the point. The way you wander, and always have, gives me the creeps." Herzog ventured nothing in reply to this outburst, save a conciliatory leer. Then, collecting his thoughts, he began, "Well, sir, in a general way, our condition is perfect. We've got 2 regiments of rifle and machine gun men, half of them equipped with the oxygen bullets. I guarantee that I could have them away from their benches and machines and on the fortifications inside of 15 minutes. Slade's armed guards, 2,500 or so, are all ready too. Then beside that, there are 8 planes in the hangars and plenty of men to take them up. If you wish, sir, I can have others brought in. The aerial bomb guns are ready. As for the oxygen supply, tanks F and L are full, K is half filled, and N and Q each have about 6,000 gallons, making a total of, let's see, sir, a total of just about 755,000 gallons. How protected? Have you got those bomb-proof overhead nets on yet? Not yet, sir. That is, not over all the lines of tanks. We ran short of steel wire last week and have only got 8 of the tanks under netting. But the work is going on fast, sir, and rush it. At all hazards, get nets over the rest of the tanks. If anything happens through this delay, remember, Herzog, I shall hold you personally responsible, and it will go hard with you." "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir," murmured the servile wretch. "Anything else, sir?" Flint thought a moment, glaring at Herzog with angry eyes, then shook his head in negation. "Very well, sir," said Herzog, withdrawing. "I'll go to work at once. By tomorrow, everything will be safe, I guarantee." He closed the door softly as he had spoken, as softly as he always did everything. Flint glared at the door. "The sneaking whelp," he murmured. "He makes my very flesh crawl. I wish to heaven he weren't so essential to us. We'd let him go damned quick." "You forget," put in Tiger, "that he knows too much to be let go, ever. No, he's a fixture. And now dismiss him from your mind, and let's go over those telegrams and radiograms again. If there is a new socialist revolt underway, and I admit it certainly begins to look like it, we've got to understand the situation. Slade will have some more reports for us in an hour or so. Till then, these must suffice." Flint, curbing his agitation, sat down at the big table and turned on the vacuum glow light. For the October afternoon was foggy, a fog that mingled with the spray of the vast falls and hung heavy over the world, and already daylight was beginning to fail. "Fools," he muttered to himself. "Fools to think they can rebel against us. Ants would have just as much show of success charging elephants as they have against the Air Trust. By tomorrow they'll be wiped out, smeared out, shattered and annihilated, whoever and wherever they are. By tomorrow at the latest. Again I say, blind, suicidal fools." "Right you are," assented Waldron, drawing up his chair. "They don't seem to realize even yet that we own the whole round earth and all that is in it. They don't understand that their rebelling is like a tribe of naked savages going against a modern army with explosive bullets. Ah well, let them learn, let them learn. It takes a whip to teach a cur. Let them feel the lash and learn." At this same hour, in the last retreat near Port Colborne, in the state of Ontario, once a province of Canada, 6 grim and determined men were gathered together. We already recognized Craig, Grantham, and Gabriel. The other 3, like them, all wore the socialist button and the little tab of red ribbon that marked them as members of the fighting sections. "Tonight," Gabriel was saying as he stood there in the gathering dusk. They dare not show a light, even behind the drawn curtain of their refuge. "Tonight, comrades, the final die is cast. Everything is ready, or as nearly ready as we shall ever be able to make it. Our report already shows that every line of communication has been broken by one swift, sharp blow. True, in a few hours all these avenues can be opened up again. By morning, the Niagara Works will be in receipt of messages. Trains will be running, the troop planes will be carrying their hordes at the command of Flint. By morning, yes, but in the meantime." He spread his fingers upward with an expressive gesture. "By morning," Craig mumbled, "what will there be left to protect?" A little silence followed. Each was busy with his own thoughts. All at once, one of the 3 newcomers spoke. a tall, light-haired fellow he seemed in that dim light, with a strong southern accent. "Pardon me for asking, Gabriel," said he, removing a pipe from his mouth, "or for discussing details familiar to you all, but coming as I have come direct from the New Orleans refuge, they blew it up last week, you know. Of course, I haven't got things as clearly in mind yet as you all have. Now, as I understand it, while we maneuver over the plant, blow up the barricades, and if possible, get the oxygen tanks, our men on the ground will pour in through the gaps and storm the place, under the command of Edward Hargreaves. Is that the idea?" "Exactly, Comrade Marion," answered Gabriel. "You've hit it to a T." Craig laughed grimly as he drew at his pipe. "Just as we're going to hit those big tanks," said he. "It's tonight or never, comrades. They're putting steel nets over them already. By tomorrow, the whole place will be protected by huge grillwork, fully 100 feet above the tops of the tanks. Oh, they seem to have thought of everything, those plutes. But they'll just be a shade too late this time. Just a shade too late." Another silence, broken again by the tall southerner. "Just let me get this thing quite clear," said he. "We're to start at 5:30, you say, walk past the Welland Canal feeder, out of the Monk Aviation Grounds, and find everything ready there?" "Correct," said Gabriel. "All 6 of us. That's part of the program. Comrades you don't know, out there, comrades in the employ of the Air Trust itself, will have 6 machines ready. One of them will be the very machine that they tried to get us with in the Great Smokies. So you see, we're going to use the Air Trust equipment, their field, and even their own telenite, to put them out of business forever and to free the world." "Poetic justice, all right enough," laughed Marion. "At the same time that we're attacking from an elevation of perhaps 3,000 feet, the lateral attack will be delivered. About how many men do you count on for that?" "Well," judged Gabriel, "within a 10-mile radius of the plant, at least 100,000 men are waiting, this very instant, with every nerve keyed up to fighting tension, scattered in a vast variety of ingenious and cleverly devised hiding places, with their chlorine grenades and their revolvers shooting little hydrocyanic acid gas bullets. They're waiting the signal, a rocket in mid-heaven." "Hydrocyanic acid gas!" exclaimed Marion, forgetting to smoke. "Why, one whiff of that is death." "It is," agreed Gabriel. "Remember, this is a war of extermination. It's a case of them or us, and if we're worsted, the whole world loses. While if they are, then liberty is born. That's why this gas is justifiable. They'll try to use oxygen bullets on us, never fear. But where they can kill 10 with those, we can annihilate 100 with our kind. Swine, they have called us, and fools and apes. Well, we shall see. We shall see. When it comes to an out-and-out fight between plutocrat and proletarian, who is the better man?" Again silence came, and this time it was Grantham who broke it. "Comrades," said he, "after you've seen as many socialists shot down as I have, shot down and burned as Brevard was, you'll lose any lingering idea of civilized warfare you may still retain. They hunt us like beasts, prison us in foul traps, ride us down, crush us, break and tear us, and burn us alive, because we struggle to be free men and women, not slaves. Now that our hour has struck, now that their lines of communication and defense are breached, and they, though they still don't fully understand it, are penned there in their heaven-offending, monstrous, horrible plant at the falls, no true man can hesitate to smash them down with no more compunction than as though they were so many rattlesnakes or scorpions. This isn't 1915, wherein political and civil rights still existed and we weren't hunted outlaws. This is 1925, and conditions are all different. It's war, war, war to the death now. And if war is hell, then they are going to get hell this time, not we." Nobody spoke for a little while, but Marion and Craig smoked contemplatively, and the others sat there in the dusk, sunk in thought. All at once, a door opened, and the vague form of a woman became visible. "Comrades, you must go," said she. "It's nearly 5:30. By the time you've got everything in readiness, you'll have no time to lose." Right, Catherine, answered Gabriel. Come, comrades, up and at it. 10 minutes later, they all issued forth into the soft gloom. All were in aviator's dress, and each carried a parcel by a handle held with stout straps. Had you seen them, you would have noticed they took particular pains not to jar or shake these parcels, or approach unduly near each other. At the door of the refuge, Catherine said goodbye to each, and added some brave words of cheer. Her farewell to Gabriel was longer than to the others, and for a moment their hands met and clung. Go, she whispered. Go, and God bless you. Go, even though it be to death. Their airmen will take toll of some of the attackers, Gabriel. Not all the comrades will return. Oh, may you, may you. What is written on the book of fate will be, he answered. Our petty hopes and fears are nothing, Catherine. If death awaits me, it will be sweet, for it will come tonight in the supreme service of the human race. Goodbye. With a sudden motion, the girl took his face between her hands and kissed his forehead. For all her courage and strength, he sensed her heart wildly beating, and he felt her tears. Goodbye, Gabriel, she breathed. Would I might go with you. Would that my duty did not hold me here. Goodbye. Then he was gone with the others, into the thickening obscurity of the fog-shrouded evening. Now Catherine stood there alone, head bowed and wet face hidden in both hands. As the little fighting band disappeared, back to the girl drifted a few words of song, soft-hummed through the dusk, the deathless chorus of the International. Now comes the hour supreme, to arms each in his place. The new dawn's International shall be the human race. End of chapter 33. Chapter 34 of The Air Trust by George Allan, England. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 34. The Attack. Halt! Who goes there? The challenge rang sharply on the night air, outside a small gate in the barricade of the Monk Aviation Grounds. Liberty, answered Gabriel, pausing as he gave the password. All right, come on, said a vague figure at the gate. The little group approached. The gate opened. Silently, they entered the enclosure. Another man stepped from the hangar. In his hand he held an electric flash, which he threw upon the newcomers, one by one. Right, he commented, and took Gabriel by the hand. This way. 10 minutes later, all of them were in the air, save only Gabriel, who insisted on staying till his entire squad had made a clean getaway. Then he too rose, and now in a long, swift line, the fighting squadron straightened away to northeastward on the 20-mile run to Niagara. The night was foggy, chill, and dark. All the aviators had instructions to fly not less than 2,500 feet high, to keep a careful lookout lest they collide, and to steer by the lights of the great Air Trust plant. For, misty though the heavens were, still Gabriel could see the dim glow of the tremendous aerial searchlights dominating Goat Island. Lights of 5 million candle power, maintained by current from the falls, incessantly sweeping the sky on the lookout for just such perils as now, indeed, were drawing near. Momentarily, as he flew, Gabriel perceived these huge lights growing brighter through the mist, and apprehension won upon him. Incredibly strong, he muttered to himself as he glanced from his barometer to the shining fog ahead. Even though the mist will be thicker over the falls than anywhere else, there's a good possibility they may pierce it and pick us up. And then, look out for their planes and swift fighting dirigibles. He rotated the rising plane and now soared to 2,800 feet. Below, and on either side of him, nothing but tenuous fog. Ahead, the swiftly approaching fan of radiance, white, dazzling, beautiful, that seemed to gush from earth so far below and to the eastward. Already the thunders of the falls were audible. Where are the others, Gabriel wondered, his thoughts seeming to hum and roar in his head in harmony with the shuddering diapason of the muffler-deadened exhaust. No way of telling now. Each man for himself, and each to do his best. And then his thoughts reverted to Catherine, and round his heart a sudden yearning seemed to strengthen his stern, indomitable resolve. Victory or death. But now there was scant time for thought. The moment of action was already close at hand. Far below there, hidden by night and dark and mist, Gabriel knew 100,000 comrades of the fighting sections were lying hidden, waiting for the signal to advance. "And it's time now," he said aloud, thrilled by a wondrous sense of vast responsibility, a sense that on this moment hung the fate of the world. "It's time for the signal. Now then, up and at them." Taking the rocket, a powerful affair capable of casting an intense calcium light, he touched the fuse to a bit of smoldering punk fastened in a metal cup at his right hand. Then, as it flared, he launched the rocket far into the void. Below came a quick spurt of radiance, and a long, vivid streak that shot away with incredible rapidity. Gabriel followed it a moment with his gaze, then smiled. "The Rubicon is crossed," said he. "The gates of the Temple of Janus are wide open, and now comes war." He rose again, skimming to a still higher altitude as the glare of the great works drew closer and closer underneath. The wind roared in his ears, louder than the whirling propellers. The whole fabric of the airplane quivered as it climbed up, above the rushing, bellowing cataract. Where are the others, thought he, and reached for a Thanatos projectile in the rack near the metal cup where the punk still glowered. All at once, a glare of light burst upward through the white glowing mist, and the plane reeled with the airwave, as now a thunderous concussion boomed across the empty spaces of the sky. At the same moment, a faint rippling noise mounted to Gabriel, a sound for all the world like the tearing of stout canvas. Then followed a chattering racket, something like distant mowing machines at work, and now all blent to a steady, determined roar. Gabriel almost thought to hear, as he launched his own projectile, far sounds as of the shouts and cries of men. But of this he could not make sure. "They're at it anyhow," he exulted. "At it, at last. By the way our men have launched the attack, the first explosion must have breached a wall. God, what wouldn't I give to be down there in the thick of it rather than here? Crash. Again a spouting geyser of light and uproar burst into midair. "That was my Thanatos speaking," cried Gabriel. "Now for another." Before he could drop it, as he circled round and round, directly over the great flailing beams of the air trust searchlights, a third detonation shattered the heavens, nearly unseating him. Up sprang the roar with wonderful intensity, reflected from the earth as from a giant sounding board, and Gabriel noted with keen satisfaction that one of the huge light beams had gone dark. Put out one of them, anyway, so far, thought he, and swung again to westward, and once more dropped a messenger of death to tyranny. Now the bombardment became general. Trussed aerial gun projectiles began bursting all around. Every second or two, terrible concussions leaped toward the zenith, and the earth, hidden somewhere down below the fog blanket, seemed flaming upward like a huge volcano. One by one, the searchlights, whipping the sky, went black, and now the glow of them was fast diminishing, only to be replaced by a ruddier and more intermittent glare. "The plant's burning at last," thought Gabriel. "Heaven grant the fire may spread to the oxygen tanks, if we can only get those." Again he launched a projectile, and again he circled over the doomed plant. A swift black shape swooped by him. He had just time to exchange a yell of warning when it was gone. The near peril gripped his heart, but did not shake it. "Close call," said he. If that machine and his had met, goodbye forever. But after all, the danger of collision in midair, or of being struck by a projectile from some other machine above, was no greater than his comrades on the ground were facing. Not so great, perhaps. Many a one would meet his death from the aerial attack. In a war like this, 1,000 perils threatened. Gabriel only hoped that Hargreaves, down below there, could hold them back, away till the walls should have been destroyed. Circling, ever circling, now hearing some echoes of the earth battle, some grenade volleys and rapid-fire clattering, now deafened and all but blinded by the vast, up-belching explosions of the Thanatos projectiles, Gabriel flew among the drifting mists and vapors. Still, he was guided by one or two searchlights, but most of these were gone now. Yet the glare of the conflagration below was luridly shuddering through the fog, painting it all a dull and awful red. Red. Suddenly words came into Gabriel's mind, the words of his own poem. Red as blood, the blood of the shattered miner. Blood of the boy in the rifle pits, blood of the coughing child slave. Blood of the mangled trainman, blood that the carpenter shed. For your sake, for the world's sake this, he cried, and hurled another Thanatos. If ever war of liberation was holy, this is that war. Suddenly, through all the turmoil of shattering explosions, tossing air currents, and drifting acrid smoke, he became conscious of a sudden, swift-flying pursuer. By the light of the burning plant, down there somewhere in the vapors of the thunderous falls, he saw a hawk-like plane that swooped toward him with incredible velocity, savage and lean and black. Off to the right, a sudden spattering of shots in mid-air told him the battle in the sky was likewise being engaged. He saw vague, veiled explosions there, then a swift falling trail of flame. A pang shot through his heart. Had one of his companions fallen and been dashed to death? He could not tell. He had no time to wonder, even for already the attacker was upon him. The swift air trust Impervier, one of the dreaded air fleet of the world monopoly. Gabriel had just time to swerve from the attack and swoop aloft, dropping his next to last projectile as he did so, while the whirling shape zoomed past, swung round, and once more charged. He saw, vaguely, two men sat in it. One was the pilot, a Grey or Cosmos mercenary. The other, could it be? Yes, there was no mistaking. The other was Slade himself, commander of the hireling army of plutocracy. Out from the attacking plane jetted sudden spurts of fire. Gabriel heard the zip, zip, zip of bullets, heard a ripping tear as one of his canvas wings was punctured. God help him, had that explosive bullet struck a wire or a stay. Then, maddened to despair and burning with fierce rage against this monster of the upper air that now was hurtling death at him, he once more banked, brought his machine sharp round, and charged, full drive, at the attacker. This tactic, for a second, must have disconcerted the Air Trust mercenaries. Gabriel's speed was terrific. With stupefying suddenness, the Epervier loomed up ahead of him. "Now," he shouted, "take this, from me." Half rising from his seat, he hurled his last remaining projectile full at Slade, then wrenched his own plane off sharply to the left. A thunderous concussion and a dazzling burst of light told him his chance shot had been effective. He got a second's vision of a shattered black mass, a tangle of girders, wires, collapsed planes that seemed to hang a moment in midair, of whirling bodies, of wreckage indescribable. Then the broken debris plunged with awful speed and vanished through the red glowing mist. Even as he shuddered, sickened at the terrible though necessary deed, the deed which alone could save him from swift death, an overwhelming air wave from the terrible explosion struck his speeding machine. The machine captured in the Great Smokies from the Air Trust itself. It heeled over like an unballasted yacht under the lash of a hurricane. Vainly, Gabriel jerked at wheel and levers. He could not right it. As it seemed to come under control, a stay snapped. The plane swooped, yawned forward, and stuck its nose into an air hole, caused by the vast uprising smoke and heat of the huge conflagration beneath. Then, lost and beyond all guidance, it somersaulted, slid away down a long drop, and whirling wildly over and over, plunged with Gabriel into the glowing, smoking, detonating void. End of chapter 34. Chapter 35 of The Air Trust by George Allan, England. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 35. Terror and Retreat. When, despite Flint's imperative orders, Slade failed to reopen the lines of communication for him before nightfall, and when President Supple wired in code for a little more time in obeying Air Trust orders, the billionaire recognized that something of terrible menace now had suddenly broken in upon his dream of universal power. He summoned Waldron and Herzog for another conference, and together they feverishly planned to put the works under defense, until such time as troops could be got through to them. The plant regiment was mustered, and the Cosmos mercenaries and scabs were made ready. The machine guns were unlimbered for action, and large quantities of ammunition were delivered to them, and to the aerial bomb guns as nightfall lowered. Herzog set 800 men to work, covering all the tanks possible with wire netting of heavy steel. The searchlights were all ordered into use, steam and electrical connections were made, and the air fleet was manned, and everything was done that unlimited wealth and bitter hate of the workers could suggest. With curses on the fog, which hid the upper air from view, the old man now stood at one of the west windows of his inner office, the office on the top floor of the main administration building, overlooking nearly the whole plant. "Damn the weather," he snarled, his gold teeth glinting. "In addition to all this mist from the falls, there's a regular cloud bank settling down tonight. Under cover of it, what may not happen? Nothing could have been worse, Waldron. Though we shall soon control the air, that won't be enough so long as fogs and mists escape us. Our next problem... Hello, now what the devil's that?" "What's what?" retorted Waldron testily. He had been drinking rather more heavily than usual that day, both because of the dull weather and because the falls invariably got on his nerves during his brief sojourns there. Away from New York and his favorite haunts, Waldron was lost. "What's that?" he repeated with an ugly look. "This roaring, glaring, trembling place gives me... That light in the sky!" cried Flint, excitedly pointing. "See? No, it's gone now. But it looked like a rocket, a signal of some kind thrown from an aeroplane, Waldron laughed harshly. "Seeing things, eh?" he sneered, coming across to the window himself and peering out. "I don't see anything. Nothing here to worry about, Flint, with all these walls and guns and netting and airships and a private army and all. What more do you want? Not getting nervous in your old age, are you, eh?" he jibed bitterly. "Or is your conscience beginning to wake up as the graveyard becomes more a probability than—" "Enough," Flint snapped at him. "When you drink, Waldron, you're an idiot. Now, forget all this, and let's get down to work. I tell you, I just now saw a signal light up there in the mist. There's trouble coming tonight, as sure as we own the earth. Trouble, maybe big trouble. Merciful God, I rather think we oughtn't to be here, in person, eh? We'd be much better off out of here, if there should be any fighting, you know?" His voice broke in a falsetto pipe. Waldron laughed brutally. "Bravo!" cried he, with flushed and mottled face. "You'll do, Flint. I see right now the firing line is the life for you. Well, let the row come and devil take it, say I. Better anything than—" The sentence was never finished, for suddenly a shattering explosion hurled a vast section of the western encircling wall outward, out into the river, and, where but a moment before the partners had been gazing at a high concrete and steel barrier with electric lights on top, now only a huge gap appeared, through which the foam-tossed current could be seen leaping swiftly onward toward the falls. Hurled back from the window by the force of the explosion, both men were struck dumb with terror and amaze. Flint rallied first, and with a cry of rage inarticulate as a beast's howl, sprang to the window again. Outside, a scene of desolation and wild activity was visible. The great paved courtyard, flanked by the turbine houses and the wall on one hand, and on the other by the oxygen tank's huge bulk that loomed vaguely through the electric-lighted mist, now had begun to swarm with men. Flint saw a few forms lying prone under the hard glare of the arcs and vacuum lights. Others were crawling, writhing, making strange contortions. Here, there, men with rifles were running to take their posts. Hoarse orders were shouted, and shrill replies rang back. Then, all at once, a kind of sputtering series of small explosions began to rip along the edge of the south wall. And now, machine guns began to talk, with a dry, hard metallic clatter. And, though whence these came Flint could not see, grenades began flying over the wall and bursting in the court. Though unwounded, men fell everywhere these gas projectiles exploded. Fell stone dead and stiffening at once, fell in strange, monstrous, awful attitudes of death. Steam began billowing up, and crackling electrical discharges leaped along the naked wires of the outer barricades. The whole plant shook and rattled with the violent concussions of the aerial bomb guns already searching the upper air with shrapnel. Somewhere, out of the range of vision, another terrible shock made the building tremble to its nethermost foundation, and wild yells and cries, as of a charge, a repulse, a savage and determined rush, echoed through the vast enclosure. Came a third detonation, and, blinding in its intensity, a globe of fire burst almost beneath the window, 5 stories below. The partners, shaking and pale, retreated hastily. A swift, upward-rising shape swept over the courtyard and was gone. One of the air fleet now launched to meet the attackers. Far below, a sudden crumbling shudder of masonry told the billionaire not a moment was to be lost, for already one wing of the administration building was swaying to its fall. "Quick, Waldron, quick!" he shouted in the shrill treble of senility, and ran into the corridor that led to the north wing. Waldron, suddenly sobered, followed, and from the offices, where the night shift of clerks were laboring, or had been till the first explosion, came crowding pale and frightened men. Not the fighting caste of air trust slaves, these, but the anemic chemists and experimenters and clerical workers, scabs to a man. Now, in the common sentiment of fear, they jostled Flint and Waldron as though these plutocrats had been but common clay, and in the corridor a babel rose, through which fresh volleys and ever more violent explosions ripped and thundered. Flint struck savagely at some who barred his way, and Waldron elbowed through with curses. "Get out of the way, you swine!" shrilled the old billionaire. "Make way there, way!" The 2 men reached a door that led by a private passage, through to the steel and concrete laboratories. "Here, this way, Flint," shouted Waldron. "If those hell devils drop a bomb on us, this building will cave like jackstraws. Our only safety is here, here!" Thoroughly cowed now, with all the brutal bluster and half-drunken swagger gone, Waldron whipped out a bunch of keys, tremblingly unlocked the door, and blundered through. Flint followed. Behind them, others tried to press, on toward the armored laboratories, but with vile blasphemies the plutocrats beat them back and slammed the door. "To hell with them," shouted Flint, perfectly ashen now and shaking like a leaf, the fear of death strong on his withered soul. "We've got all we can do to look after ourselves. Quick, Waldron, quick!" Both men, sick with panic, with fear of the unknown terror from above, stumbled rather than ran along the passage, and presently reached the laboratory. Here Waldron unlocked another door, this time a steel one, and, as they both crowded through, pressed a hand to his dizzy forehead. "Safe," he gulped, slamming the door again. "They can't get us here, at any rate, no matter what happens. This place is like a fort, and—" His speech was interrupted by a dazzling, deafening tumult of sound. The earth trembled, and the laboratory, steel though it was, with concrete facing, rocked on its foundation. A glare through the windows, quickly fading, told them the building they had just quitted was now but a smoking pile of ruin. Flint gasped, unable to speak. Waldron, shaking and cowed, tried to moisten his dry lips with a thick tongue. We weren't any too soon," he gulped, without one thought of the doomed scabs in the administration building. Stern justice was now overtaking these wretches, false to the working class and eager to serve the air trust. Not only eager to serve, but zealous in any attack on the proletariat, and by their very employment, serving to rivet the shackles on the world. Now they were abandoned by their masters. Between upper and nether millstone, moving with neither, they were caught and crushed. And as the great building quivered, gaped wide open, swayed and came thundering down in a vast pile of flame-lit ruin, whence a volcanic burst of fire, smoke, and dust arose, they perished miserably, time-servers, cowards, and self-seekers to the last. But Flint and Waldron still survived. Though the very earth shook and trembled with the roar of bombs, the crumbling of massive walls, the rattle of volley fire, and the crashing of the terrible grenades that mowed down hundreds as they spread their poisonous gas abroad, through the shriek of projectiles, the thunder of the airship guns now sweeping the sky in blind endeavor to shatter the attackers, all swelled the tumult to a frightful storm of terror and of death. They still lived, cowered and cringed there in the bomb-proof steel and concrete of the inner laboratories. Come, Flint quavered, peering about him at the deserted room. still glaring with electric light, the room now abandoned by all its workers who, members of Herzog's regiment, had run to take their posts at the first signal of attack. Come, this isn't safe enough, even here. In there. He pointed toward a vault-like door, leading to the subterranean steel chambers where Herzog eventually counted on storing some hundreds of thousands of tons of liquid oxygen. The reserve chambers, impregnable to lightning, fire, frost, or storm, to man's attacks or nature's. The chambers blasted from the living rock, deep as the falls themselves, vacuum-lined, wondrous achievement of the highest engineering skill the world could boast. There, repeated Flint, plucking at the dazed Waldron's sleeve. Tool steel and concrete, 25 feet thick, and vacuum chambers all about. There we can hide. There's safety. Come quick. Staring, white-faced, he who had been so red and dumb, Waldron yielded. Together, furtive as the criminals they were, these two world masters slunk toward the steel door, while without, their empire was crashing down in smoke and flame and blood. They had almost reached it when a smash of glass at the far end of the laboratory whipped them around in keener terror. Staring, wild-eyed, they beheld the crouching figure of Herzog. Running, even as he cringed, he had upset a glass retort, which had shattered on the concrete floor. And as he ran, he screamed, "They're in! They're coming! Quick, the steel vaults! Let me in there! Let me in!" The coward was now a maniac with terror, his face perfectly white, writhen with panic, and with staring eyes that gleamed horribly under the greenish vacuum lights. "Back, you! Get out!" roared Waldron, raising a fist. A sudden belch of flame outside split the night with terrible virescence. The whole steel building trembled and swayed, some of its girders buckled, and the east wall, nearest the oxygen tanks, caved inward as a mass of many tons was hurled against it. A stunning concussion flung all three men to the floor, and as they fell, a withering heat wave quivered through the place. "The oxygen tanks," gasped Flint. "They're blown up. They're burning. God help us." Scorching, yet still eager to live, he crawled on hands and knees toward the steel door. Waldron dragged himself along, half dead with terror. Now, dripping gouts of inextinguishable fire were raining on the roof of the building. A whirlwind of flame was sweeping all its eastern side, and a glare like that of hell itself seared the eyes of the fugitives. Quivering, trembling, slavering, the old man and Waldron wrenched the steel door open. Me, let me in! Me! Save me!" howled Herzog, dragging himself toward them. They only laughed derisively, with howls of demoniacal scorn. "You slave, you cur!" shouted Waldron, and spat at him as he drew the vault door shut. "You cringing dog! Stay there now and face it!" The great door boomed shut. In the cool of the winding stairway of steel which led, lighted by electricity, to the trapdoor and the ladder down into the tremendous vaults, the world masters breathed deeply once more, respited from death. Herzog, screaming like a fiend in torment, clawed at the impenetrable steel door, raved, begged, entreated, and tore his fingers on the lock. No answer save the muffled echo of a jeer from within. Boom! What was that? Mad with terror though he was, he whirled about, and faced the room now quivering with heat. Even as he looked, a great gap yawned in the western wall, farthest from the flame-belching oxygen tank that had been struck. Through this gap, pouring irresistibly as the sea, swept a tide of attackers, storming the inner citadel of the infernal, world-strangling air trust. At the head of this victorious army, this flood triumphant of the embattled proletariat, Herzog's staring eyes caught a moment's glimpse of a dreaded face, the face of Gabriel Armstrong. Gasping, the coward and tool of the world masters made one supreme decision. Close by, a rack of vials stood. He whirled to it, snatched out a tiny bottle, and waiting not even to draw the cork, crunched the bottle, glass and all, in his fang-like uneven teeth. An instant change swept over him. His staring eyes closed, his head fell forward, his whole body collapsed like an empty sack. He fell, twitched once or twice, and was dead. Dead ere the attackers could reach the door of steel where his bestial masters had betrayed him. Thus perished Herzog, coward and tool, a victim of the very forces he himself had helped create. And at the moment of his death, the masters he had cringed to and had served, sneering with scorn at him even in their mortal terror, were tremblingly descending the long metal ladder to the impregnable vaults of steel below. End of chapter 35. Chapter 36 of The Heir Trust by George Allan England. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 36. The Storming of the Works. Plunged into the abyss of mist and flame by the attack of the Heir Trust of Pervier, Gabriel had abandoned himself for lost. Death, mercifully swift, he had felt could be his only fate. And with this thought had come no fear, but only a wild joy that he had shared this glorious battle, sure to end in victory. This was his only thought, this and a quick vision of Catherine. Then, as he hurtled down and over, whirling drunkenly into the void, all clear perception left him. Everything became a swift blur, a rushing confusion of terrible wind and lurid light, and the wild roar of myriad explosions. Came a shock, a sudden checking of the plunge, a long and rapid glide, as the de Vreeland stabilizer of the machine, asserting its automatic action, brought it to a level keel once more. But now the engine was stopped. Gabriel, realizing that some chance still existed to save his life, wrenched madly at his levers. "If I can volplane down," he panted, sick and dizzy, "there may yet be hope." Hope. Yes, but how tenuous. What chance had he, coasting to Earth at that low level to avoid the deadening bombs, the aerial shrapnel being hurtled aloft, the poison gas, the surface fire? Here, there, and yonder, terrific explosions were shattering the echoes as the Air Trust batteries swept the fog from their aeroplane-destroying missiles. Whither should he steer? He knew not. All sense of direction was lost, nor could the compass tell him anything. A glance at the barometric gauge showed him an altitude of but 850 feet, and this was decreasing with terrible rapidity. Strive as he might, he could not check the swift descent. "God send me a soft place to fall on," he thought, grimly, still clinging to his machine and laboring to jockey it under control. Close by, a thunderous detonation crashed through the mist. His machine reeled and swerved, then plunged more swiftly still. All became vague, to Gabriel, a dream, a nightmare. Crash! Flung from the seat, he sprawled through treetops, caught himself, fell to a lower limb, slid off and landed among the thick bushes, and through these came to earth. The wrecked plane, whirling away and down, fell crashing into the river that rushed cascading by and vanished in the firelit mist. Stunned yet half-conscious, Gabriel presently sat up and pressed his right hand to his head. His left arm felt numb and useless, and when he tried to raise it, he found it refused his will. "Where am I now, I'd like to know," he muttered. "Not dead, anyhow. Not yet." A continuous roar of explosions shuddered the air, mingled with the booming of the mighty falls. Shouts and cheers and the rattle of machine guns assailed his ear. The glare of the searchlights, through the mist and steam, was darkened momentarily by thick, greasy coils of smoke, shot through by violent flashes of light as explosions took place. Gabriel struggled to his feet, and peered about him. "Still alive," said he, "and I must get back into the fight. That's all that matters now, the fight." He knew not yet where he was, but this mattered to nothing. His machine had, in fact, fallen near the riverbank, in the eastern section of Prospect Park, beyond the Goat Island Bridge. This region of the park having been left outside the fortifications in the extension of the Air Trust plant. The trees here had saved his life. Had he smashed to earth 100 yards further north, he would have been shattered against high walls and roofs. Still giddy, but sensing no pain from his injured left arm, Gabriel made way toward the scene of conflict. He knew nothing of how the tide of battle was going, nothing of his position, nothing as to what men he would first meet, his comrades or the enemy. But for these considerations he had no thought. His only idea, fixed and grim, was the fight. Dazed though he still was, he nerved himself for action. And so, pressing onward through the livid glare, through the night shattered by stupendous detonations, he drew his revolver and broke into a run. Strange evidences of the battle now became evident. He saw an unexploded grenade lying beside a wounded man who grasped at him and moaned with pain. Over a wrecked motor car, greasy smoke was rising as it burned. Louder shouting drew him down a path to the left. Masses of moving figures became dimly visible through the mist, and now stabs of fire pierced the confusion and clamorous night. Gabriel jerked up his revolver as he ran, the terrible weapon shooting bullets charged with hydrocyanic acid gas. A man rose before him, shouting. Gabriel leveled the weapon, but a glimpse of red ribbon on the other's coat brought it down again. "Comrade," cried he, "where's the attack?" The other pointed. "Gabriel, is that you?" he gasped, staring. "Yes, I fell. Machine smashed. Come on." "Hurt?" "No. Arm, maybe. No matter. God, what's this?" Toward them, a sudden swirl of men came sweeping, stumbling, shouting in pandemonium. "Our men!" cried Gabriel, starting forward again. "We're being driven. Rally here! Rally!" Beyond, a louder crackling sounded. Here, there, men plunged down. The retreat was becoming a rout. Yelling, Gabriel flung himself upon the men. "Back there," he vociferated. "Back and at the walls. Come on, boys, now. Come on!" His voice, well known to nearly all, thrilled them again with new determination. A shout rose up. It swelled, deepened, roared to majestic volume. Then the tide turned. Back went the fighting men of the Great Revolution, back at the machine guns, mounted in the breached walls. Gabriel was caught and whirled along in that living tide. He found himself at its crest, its foremost wave. Behind him, a roaring, rushing river of men, before the inner citadel. Gathering speed and weight as it rolled up, the wave broke like an ocean surge over a crumbling dike. Down went the air trust gunners and the guns, down, down to annihilation. Through the breach, foaming and swelling with irresistible power, burst the tides of victory. Silenced now were the trust guns. The steam jets had none to man them. Far aloft, a last explosion told the death story of the final épervier. Here and there, from windows and corners of the wrecked and blazing plant, a little intermittent firing still continued. But now the hearts of these air trust defenders, scabs, thugs, and scourings of the slum, had turned to water in face of the triumphant army of the working class. They fled, those mercenaries, and all the ways and inner strongholds, such as still were left, now lay open to Gabriel and his comrades. Lighted by the blazing buildings and the vast fire torch of an oxygen tank off to eastward, they stormed the final citadel, the steel and concrete laboratories, heart and soul and center of the hellish world conspiracy. Stormed it as it began to blaze and crumble, stormed it in search of Flint and Waldron, would-be murderers of the world. Stormed it, only to see Herzog gnash his teeth upon the flask and fall and die. Only to know that there, within the rock-hewn, steel-lined tanks below, their enemies had still outwitted them. The swift onrush of the fire drove the victors back. "Out, comrades, out of here," shouted Gabriel, facing the attackers. None too soon. Hardly had they beaten a retreat back into the vast courtyard again, strewn with the dead, when a second oxygen tank exploded, overwhelming the laboratory building with tons of flying steel. Leaping toward the zenith, a giant tongue of flame roared heavenward. So intense the heat had now become, that the solid brick and concrete walls, exposed to the direct reverberation of the flame, began to crack and crumble. Gabriel ordered a general retreat of the attacking army. Victory was won, and to stay near that gushing tornado of flame, with new explosions bound to occur as the other oxygen tanks let go, must mean annihilation. So the triumphant army of the proletariat fell back and back still further, out into the wrecked and trampled park, and all through the city, where shattered buildings, many of them ablaze, and broken trees, dead bodies, smashed ordnance, and chaos absolute, told something of the story of that brief but terrible war. Ringed round the perishing ruins of the Air Trust they stood, these mute, thrilled thousands. Silence fell, now, as they watched the roaring, ever-mounting flames that, whipped by the breeze, crashed upward in long and cadenced tourbillons of white of awful incandescence. And the river, ever hurrying, always foaming on and downward to its titanic plunge, sparkled with eerie lights in the vast glow. Its voice of thunder seemed to chant the passing and the requiem of the curse of the world, capitalism. End of chapter 36. Chapter 37 of The Air Trust by George Allan, England. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 37. Death in the Pit of Steel. And Flint now, what of him, and Waldron? While the Air Trust plant was burning, crumbling, smashing down, what of its masters, the masters of the world? A sense of vast relief possessed them both at first, as the steel door clanged after them. Now, for a time at least, they realized that they were safe from the people, safe from the awakened and triumphant proletariat. Even now, had they surrendered, they would have been spared, but nothing was further from their thoughts than any treating with the despised and hated enemy. Foremost in the mind of each now was the thought that if they could but stand siege a day or so, the troops of the government, their government and their troops, their own personal property, would inevitably rescue them. With this comforting belief, together they descended the long steel staircase to the trap door, passed through this, and climbed down the metal ladder to the vast storage vaults. Here everything was cool and quiet and well lighted. Not yet had the electric generating plant been put out of action, though all its workers had either been drafted into the ranks of the Cosmos mercenaries or Herzog's regiments, or else had fled to hiding. Still, the huge turbines and enormous dynamos were whirling unattended. Thus, for the first few minutes, in their living tomb, down over which the ruins of the now white-hot laboratory building had crashed, the World Masters had electric light. Reassured a little, they descended to the very bottom of the first huge tank. "God," snarled Flint as he breathed deeply and glared about him. The curs, the swine, to think of this really happening. And to think that if we hadn't got here just in time, they'd actually have used violence on us. Waldron laughed brutally, his body still trembling and his face chalky. His laugh echoed hollowly from the metal walls. "You old fool," he spat. "Canting old hypocrite to the last, eh? Violence? What the devil do you expect? Rosewater and confetti? Violence was all that ever held 'em, wasn't it? And when they slipped the leash, naturally, they retorted. That's all. Violence? You make me sick. Damned lucky for us if we get through this yet without violence, you whining cur." Flint, for the first time hearing Waldron's honest opinion of him, failed even to note it. All his panic-stricken ear had caught was the note of hope, of survival. Clutching eagerly at Waldron's sleeve, he cackled. If we get through, you say, then in your opinion, there is a chance to get through. They can't get us here? We surely shall be rescued? Bah! Waldron flung at him, some latent spark of courage still smoldering in his sodden breast, whereas old Flint was craven to the marrow. "You nauseate me. Afraid to die, eh? Well, so am I, but not so damned paralyzed and sick with panic as all that. If you'd taken less dope the last 20 years, you'd have more nerve now to face the music. World master, you, eh? Playing the biggest game on Earth, and now, when things break bad, you squeal. Ugh, you called me a quitter once, you mealy-mouthed old pecksniff. We'll see now who quits. We'll see, at a showdown, who can face it, you or I." Waldron's brutality, the hard, savage quality that all his life had made him Tiger Waldron, now was beginning to reassert itself. His first sheer panic over, a little manhood was returning, but as for Flint, no manhood dwelt in him to be awakened. Instead, each moment found him more abject and more pitiable. Like an old woman, he now wrung his hands and groaned hysterically. And now he paced the steel floor of the vault that was destined to be his tomb. And now he stopped again and stared about him with wild eyes. On all sides, sheer up 100 feet or more, the smooth steel sides of the vast oxygen tank rose, studded with long lines of rivets. Near the top, a dark aperture showed where the 6-inch pipe joined the tank, the pipe destined to fill it when Herzog's last process, never now to be completed, should have been done. The huge floor, 150 feet in diameter, sloped gently downward toward the center, and here yawned another pipe, covered by a grating, the pipe to drain the liquid oxygen out to the pumping station. So deeply set in the rock of the Niagara Cliff was this stupendous tank, and so cunningly surrounded by vacuum chambers that now no faintest sound of the falls was audible. All that betrayed the nearness of the cataract was a faint, incessant trembling of the metal walls, as though the solid ribs of Earth herself were shuddering with the impact of the plunge. Old Flint surveyed this extraordinary chamber with mingled feelings. It surely offered absolute protection, for the present, or seemed to, but his distressed mind conjured alarming pictures of the future, in case no rescue came. Death by starvation, thirst, and madness loomed before him. Nervously, he recommenced his pacing. Another terribly serious factor was to be considered. He had now been 3 hours without his dose of morphia, and his nerves were calling, tugging insistently for it. "Rotten luck," he grumbled, "that I've got none with me." Even there, in the imminent presence of disaster and death, his mind reverted to the poison, more necessary to him than food. Waldron now had grown fairly calm. He stood leaning against the steel ladder, down which they had descended. Choosing a cigar, he proceeded to light up. "Might as well be comfortable while we wait," said he. "I only wish we had a couple of chairs down here. Oversight on our part that we didn't have some steel ones put in, and a line of canned goods and a few quarts of scotch. The floor's a bit damp and cold to sit on, and I want to drink damn bad." Flint swung about and faced him, pale and shaking, tortured with fear and with longing for his dope. You don't think it will be long, do you?" he demanded. "Not long before we're taken out?" Waldron shrugged his shoulders and blew a long, thin arrow of smoke athwart the brightly lighted air. "Search me," he exclaimed. "To judge by what was happening when we made our exit, the plant must be a mess by this time. We seem to have been checked, even if not mated, Flint. I must admit they caught us by surprise. Caught us napping, damn them, after all. They were stronger than we thought, Flint, and cleverer and better organized, and so—" "Don't say we, curse you," snarled Flint. "Blame yourself if you want to, but leave me out. I knew there was trouble due, I tell you. I saw it coming. Who's been trying to crush the swine completely, if not I? Who worked night and day to have those bills put through, and who had the army increased and conscriptions started? Who's driven the president to back all sorts of things? Who's forced them? Who made the National Mounted Police a reality, if not I? Damn you, don't include me in your blame." Waldron shrugged his shoulders and smoked contemplatively. "Suit yourself," he answered. "If we both die down here, it won't matter much either way." "Die?" quavered the old jackal, suddenly forgetting his rage and peering about with furtive eyes. "Did you say die, Wally? No, you didn't say that. You didn't mean that, surely." Waldron smiled, evilly, joying in this abject fear of his hated partner. "Oh yes, I did though," he retorted. "It's quite possible, you know, in case our government, yours if you prefer, can't get troops through here, or a big general revolution sweeps things inside a day or two, we're done. We'll starve and stifle here, sure as shooting." No, not that, whimpered Flint, shuddering. "I can't die yet. I'm not ready for it. There's all that missionary work of mine not yet done, and my huge international Sunday school league to perfect, and there's the tremendous $10 million Cathedral of St. Luke the Pious that I'm having built on Riverside Drive, and there's—" "Cut it," jibed Waldron, spitting with very disgust. "If your time's come, Flint, you'll die, cathedrals or no cathedrals. Your Sunday school won't save you any more than my investments will. which have largely been wine, women, and song. As a matter of fact, if it comes to starvation, if we aren't rescued and taken out from under the red-hot wreckage that's on top of us, I'll outlive you. I can exist on my surplus adipose tissue for a while, but you're nothing but skin and bone. You'll starve far quicker than I will, old man. Don't, implored the shaking wretch, covering his eyes with both trembling hands. Moral, you oughtn't to have been a dope fiend all these years, continued Waldron cunningly, determined that now, once for all, his despised partner should hear the truth. How you've lived so long as it is, I don't understand. When I tried to marry Kate and failed, I reckoned you'd pass over in almost no time. And by the way, that's why I was so insistent. But you've disappointed me, Flint. Disappointed me sorely. You still live. It won't be long, however. Down here, you simply can't get any dope. In a little while, you'll begin to suffer the torments of hell. You'll die of starvation and drug yen, Flint. And you'll die mad. Mad. Understand me. Mad for morphine. And I shall watch you and exult. Flint cringed, shuddering, and stopped his ears. His partner, gloating over him, smoked faster now. A strange light shone in his eyes. His pulse beat faster than usual, and a certain extravagance of thought and speech had become manifest in him. He tried to compose himself, feeling that he must not push the cowardly Flint too far, but his ideas refused to follow in orderly sequence. Wonderingly, he stared at his cigar, the tip of which was now glowing more brightly than before. And then, suddenly sniffing the air, he understood. His eyes widened with horror absolute. He started forward, gasped, and cried, Flint, the oxygen is coming in. Uncomprehending, the old man still stood there, mumbling to himself. His face was now tinged with unusual color, and his heart, too, was thumping strangely. Oxygen, shouted Waldron, shaking him by the shoulder. It's leaking in, here, somewhere. If we can't stop it, we're dead men. What? Stammered the billionaire, staring at him with eyes of half-intoxicated fear. What do you mean, the oxygen? In here? In here, cried Tiger, casting a wild and terrible gaze about him at the vast empty trap of steel. Can't you smell it? That ozone smell. My God, we're lost. You're crazy, retorted Flint with vigor. Nothing of the sort could happen. His head was held high now, and new life seemed surging through that spent and drug-wrecked body. There's no way those curs could have turned on any gas here. You're crazy. Ha ha ha. Insane, eh? A good joke. Capital joke, that. I must tell it at the Union League Club. Tiger Waldron, suddenly insane, and ha ha ha. He burst into a long, shrill cachinnation. Already his face was scarlet and his mind awhirl. Though neither men understood the reason, yet the fact remained that one of the last great explosions had ruptured a subterranean check valve, closing the 6-inch pipe that was to feed the storage tanks. And now a swift, huge stream of pure oxygen gas was rushing at tremendous velocity into the vast chamber of steel. Waldron, his heart leaping as though it would burst his ribs, raised a fist to strike down his insulter, then, with drunken indecision, joined in the maniacal laughter of the staggering old man. In their ears a strange, wild humming now became audible. Lights danced before their eyes, their senses reeled, and violent, extravagant ideas surged through their drunken brains. Ha ha ha! Rang Waldron's crazy laughter, echoing the old man's. All at once, his cigar broke into flame. Cursing, he hurled it away, staggering back against the ladder, and stood there swaying, clutching it to hold himself from falling. Then he stood and stared at Flint, with eyes that started from his head, with panting breath and crimson face. The old man, in a sudden revulsion of terror, was now groveling along the floor by one of the massive walls, clawing at the steel with impotent hands, and screaming mingled prayers and oaths. His ravings, horrible to hear, echoed through the great tank, now swiftly filling with gas. "Help! Help!" he screamed. Save me, my God, save me. Let me out, let me out. 1,000,000, if you let me out. 1,000,000,000, the whole world. The world. Damn it to hell, the world, I say. I'll give the world to be let out. It's mine, I own it. All mine. Ha! Dogs, you would rise up against your master and your God, would you? But it's no use, we'll beat you yet. Out. Out. The world, I own it. All this plant, this gas, all mine. My oxygen, it chokes me. Help! Help! Swine, I'll scourge you yet. Absolute power. The world. With one final spark of energy, panting, his heart flailing itself to death under the pitiless urge of the oxygen, old Flint sprang up, ran wildly, blindly, straight across the steel floor, and screaming blasphemies like a soul in hell, dashed into the opposite wall. He recoiled, staggered, spun around, and fell sprawling most horribly, stone dead. Waldron, at sight of this awful end, felt an uncontrollable terror sweep over his drunk and maddened senses. Though all his blood was leaping in his arteries, and his breath coming so fast it choked him, yet a moment's seeming sanity possessed his reeling brain. The door up there, he screamed, with a wild, terrible curse. Then, turning toward the ladder, in spite of his fat and flabby muscles quivering in terrible spasms, he ran up the long steel structure with a supreme and ape-like agility. 50 feet he made. 75. 90. But, all at once, something seemed to break in his overtaxed heart. A blackness swam before his dazzled eyes. His head fell back. Unnerved, his fingers lost their hold, and whirling over and over in midair, he dropped like a plummet. By one wall lay Flint's body. At the foot of the ladder, like a crushed sack of bones, sprawled the corpse of Tiger Waldron. And still the rushing oxygen, with which they two had hoped to dominate the world, poured through the 6-inch main, far, far above. Senseless matter, blindly avenging itself upon the rash and evil men who impiously had sought to cage and master it. End of chapter 37. Chapter 38 of The Air Trust by George Allan, England. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 38. Visions. Thus perished Flint and Waldron, scourges of the earth. Thus they died, slain by the very forces which they had planned would betray mankind and deliver it into their chains. Thus vanished forever the most sinister and cruel minds ever evolved upon this planet. The greatest menace the human race had ever known, the evil masters of the world. And as they died, massed around their perished air trust plant, a throng of silent, earnest watchers stood, with faces illumined by the symbolic sacrificial flames, a throng of emancipated workers, of toilers from whose bowed shoulders now forever had been lifted the frightful menace of a universal bondage. Explosion after explosion burst from the tortured inferno of the vast plant. Buildings came crashing, reeling, thundering down. Walls fell amid vast, belching clouds of dust and smoke. A white, consuming sheet of flame crackled across the sinister and evil place, and in its wake glowed incandescent ruins. Then, in one final burst of thunderous tumult, the hugest tank of all, exploding with a roar like that of doom itself, hurled belching flames on high. For many miles, in Buffalo, Rochester, Toronto, and scores of cities on both sides of the Great Lakes, silent multitudes watched the glare against the midnight sky, and many wept for joy, and many prayed. All understood the meaning of that sight. The light upon the heavens seemed a signal and a beacon, a promise that the old times had passed away forever, a covenant of the new. And as the final explosion shattered the temple of bondage to wreckage, flung it far into the rushing river, and swept it over the leaping, thundering falls, the news flashed on 1,000 wires, to all cities and all lands. And though the mercenaries of the two dead world masters might still struggle and might strive to beat the toilers back to slavery again, their days were numbered and their powers forever broken. Together in the doorway of the refuge at Port Colborne, Catherine stood with Gabriel, watching the beacon of liberty upon the heavens. The light, a halo round her eager face, showed his powerful figure and the smile of triumph in his eyes. His left arm, broken by the fall in the aeroplane, now rested in a sling. His right, protecting in its strength, was round the girl. And as her head found shelter and rest at length upon his shoulder, she too smiled, and her eyes seemed to see visions in the glory of the sky. "Visions," said she softly, as though voicing a universal thought. "Do you behold them too?" He nodded. "Yes," he answered, "and they are beautiful and sweet and pure." "Visions that we now shall surely see?" "Shall surely see," he echoed, and a little silence fell. Far off, they seemed to hear a vast and thousand-throated cheering that the night wind brought to them in long and heart-inspiring cadences. "Gabriel," she said at last. "Well?" "I wish he might have seen them, and have understood. In spite of all he did and was, he was my father." "Yes," answered Gabriel, sensing her grief, "but would you have had him live through this? Live with the whole world out of his grasp again? Live with all his plans wrecked and broken? Live on in this new time where he could have comprehended nothing? Live on in misery and rage and impotence? Your father was an old man, Catherine. You know as well as I do. Better, perhaps, the whole trend of his life's thought and ambition. Even if he'd lived, he couldn't have changed now at his age. It would have been an utter impossibility. Why say more?" Catherine made no reply, but in her very attitude of trust and confidence, Gabriel knew he read the comfort he had given her. Silence a while. At last she spoke. "Visions," she whispered. "Wonderful visions of the glad new time. How do you see them, Gabriel?" "How do I see them?" His face seemed to glow with inspiration under the shining light in the far heavens. "I see them as the realization of a time, now really close at hand, when this old world of ours shall be, as it never yet has been, in truth civilized, emancipated, free. When the night of ignorance, kingcraft, priestcraft, servility and prejudice, bigotry and superstition shall be forever swept away by the dawn of intelligence and universal education, by scientific truth and light, by understanding and by fearlessness. When science shall no longer be the mystery of a class, but shall become the heritage of all mankind. When, because much is known by all, nothing shall be dreaded by any. When all mankind shall be absolutely its own master, strong and brave and free." "Like you, Gabriel," the girl exclaimed, from her heart. "Don't say that," he disclaimed. "Don't—" She put her hand over his mouth. "Shh," she forbade him. "You mustn't argue now, because your arm's just been set and we don't want any fever. If my dreams include you too, Gabriel, don't try to tell me I'm mistaken. Because I'm not, to begin with, and I know I'm not." He laughed and shook his head. "Do you realize," said he, "that when it comes to bravery and strength and the splendid freedom of an emancipated soul, I must look to you for light and leading?" "Don't," she whispered. "Look only to the future, to the newer, better world now coming to birth. The time which is to know no poverty, no crime, no children's blood wrung out for dividends. The future where no longer idleness can enslave labor to its tasks, when every man who will may labor freely, whether with hand or brain, and receive the full value of his toil undiminished by any theft or purloining whatsoever. The future," he continued, as she paused, "when crowns, titles, swords, rifles, and dreadnoughts shall be known only to history. When the earth and the fullness thereof shall belong to all earth's people, and when its soil need be no longer fertilized with human blood, its crops no longer be brought forth watered by sweat and tears. Such have been my visions and my dreams, Catherine, a few of them. Now they are coming true. And other dreams and other visions, dreams of you and visions of our life together, what of them?" "Why need you ask, Gabriel?" she answered, raising her lips to his. The sound of singing, a triumphal chorus of the accomplished revolution, a vast and million-throated song seemed wafted to them on the wings of night, and the pure stars, witnessing their love and troth, looked down upon them from the heavens where shone the fire-glow of the great emancipation. End of Chapter 38. End of The Air Trust by George Allan England.